I know, obviously, you had a legendary career even with the Gentrys and obviously with Memphis before you got to WWE, but how did you actually get into WWE? Like, did somebody recruit you in? Did somebody bring you in? How did they get you to go there?
What really happened, rock and roll career, a friend of mine, Jerry Lawler, called me, and I helped him with the wrestling album. So the next thing you know, I'm managing him on Memphis TV for 4 or 5 years. And we were doing great. And all of a sudden, I had a phone call from Howard Finkel. And Howard Finkel had saw my tapes in Memphis and knew that they were putting a show together called WrestleMania. So he gave me a call to see if I was interested. And I said, you better believe it. So about an hour later, Vince called me, and I said, feet don't fail me now, baby. And I went to New York City as fast as I could get there.
What did you think when you first got there? Like, it was going to be a success, or were you, a little thinking like, I don't know, this might be a little bit more than he could chew or more than he could handle?
Well, I'd been in New York years before that with Dick Clark because we did all those tours with the Beach Boys and Sonny and Cher and Steppenwolf and the Grassroots. And I knew what New York was like, but with the wrestling, it was a lot different than we had in Memphis. Memphis, there were 7 days a week, a lot of car trips and everything, but New York was 90% of it was all flying to the different cities. We'd go from New York to Cleveland to San Diego, California, to back to Seattle, Washington. So that's what it was really like. So it was really bigger than life, especially being in Madison Square Garden.
What was the experience like when you first got there? I mean, were you nervous, or were you feeling like you're at home?
No, not really. I enjoyed being there, but I didn't know what to expect. But whatever I expected was going to be bigger than what I really came from as far as the persona. And I had a great person to manage in King Kong Bundy, who I had in Memphis, so I already knew him. And I had Greg the Hammer Valentine, 2 people that I managed on the first WrestleMania. So I was in good shape.
I was good friends with King Kong Bundy. Actually, before he had passed, I was actually his manager for about a year, behind-the-scenes stuff. Man, what a great guy. And it's funny because on TV, what a heel, what a monster. But in real life, he was a sweetheart. Yeah,
he was so crisp, was so funny. He was hilarious. People just didn't know how funny he could really be behind the scenes.
He's another one of those guys that Hulk looked at and was like, I can make money with this guy, right? I mean, he looked at him and it's like, we're going to make money together.
Hey, buddy, everybody Hulk was with made money. We had a booking sheet that would come out every 2 weeks, and we'd look and see what cities we're in. And everybody wanted to be on the Hulkster's card because we knew there were going to be sellouts. We knew our paychecks, because there was no guaranteed money back then. So we knew our paychecks were going to be very, very good.
It's funny. I was just talking to Jim Brunzell. He said the same thing. He said, man, I used to pray that I was on Hogan's card. I'd make more money for the week or the month.
Yeah, everybody did. And like I said, that's just kind of run on 3 things. Your TV ratings. If your TV ratings are up, then your pay-per-view buy rates are going to be up. And then, of course, your house shows are going to be doing great business. If your house shows and everything else is doing good, then your merchandise is going to be good. And it really takes a lot to run a company like that. It depends on pay-per-view buy rates, the merchandise, and your house show business. Back then it did.
So when you come to the WWF, obviously you're the mouth of the South. I mean, obviously,
right.
Ledger. But where did the trademark megaphone come from? I mean, because everybody remembers you from the megaphone.
One day I was in one of the buildings, and Vince came to me and said, Jimmy, here's going to be your new gimmick. You can paint it, do anything you want to with it. And I said, okay, thank you. So he's the one that really brought it to me, and I was able to paint it up with the different people I was managing. I had different colors for them, and it turned out to be a great, great gimmick that Vince brought me that I was able to use for all these years.
Where did he get that from? Like, what was his thought process behind it? It's very interesting.
I think there was a Japanese manager when they were in Japan, and he was carrying the megaphone around. It just kind of gave him the idea then to bring it back for me. He could have gave it to Slick, Fuji, Bobby Heenan, or anybody, but I'm so glad he gave it to Jimmy Hart.
What did you think of the first WrestleMania? Because it's a chance. You're taking a huge chance, obviously huge success. But did you think it was going to be a huge success?
Well, I really didn't know because me coming from Memphis, our biggest crowds were 10 or 12,000 on a Monday night, and so to walk into a room, there's Dick Clark and there's Liberace and Mr. T and Muhammad Ali, and it was just Billy Martin. It was just Cyndi Lauper. And so it was just a thrill for me just seeing the celebrities. And then all through the audience, there were celebrities. Of course, it was a sellout, and it was going to be televised nationally in movie theaters everywhere. So, like I said, I knew it wasn't going to be no bomb. I knew that.
And was it a huge home run? Like you mentioned, obviously Greg Valentine was on that card against JYD, and Bundy beat S.D. Jones. Is that true? Because Bundy told me S.D. Jones, because he said the match was supposed to be about 3 seconds, and S.D. Jones kind of, and if you watch, he does kind of wander around a little bit. Was Bundy messing with me, or is it true that S.D. Jones kind of tried to make the match longer than it was really supposed to be?
You know what? I really can't tell you, because we got in the ring, and, you know, you got to give a chance for the people to kind of at least see you. You can't just dive on somebody so quick. So I think that was more like S.D. Jones getting his response from the crowd, Bundy getting his response from the crowd. And then from there, you know, that was it. Katie barred the door.
So funny if you look at it, like he basically beats him in 20 seconds. According to Bundy, to me, he's like, oh, I was supposed to beat him in 5 seconds. He wanted some extra time out there. So who knows? He might have been just messing with me saying that.
Right. But I think that was Bundy just kidding with you.
And obviously, Greg the Hammer, one of the all-time greats. I feel like his IC title run was great. You like working with the Hammer?
Hammer's great. I still see him off and on now, but we had a great run together for so many years. But Greg's he's very special. He's kind of a throwback from the old school. You know, his daddy was a great wrestler back in the day. But Greg had the bleach blonde hair and the long robes, kind of like a Ric Flair, Gorgeous George, Buddy Rogers type thing. But it was just a great experience. As a matter of fact, everybody I was able to manage up in New York was phenomenal.
Hey, you had quite the stable. Even adorable Adrian Adonis, whose name is back in the news because of that documentary, and he's got a new book out, too. So even adorable Adrian Adonis was an awesome one that you managed.
Adrian Adonis, Dino Bravo, the Honky Tonk Man, Greg Valentine, King Kong Bundy, the Hart Foundation, the Nasty Boys, the Rougeau Brothers, Earthquake and Typhoon, Terry and Dory Funk, Hulk Hogan and Brutus Beefcake. I mean, it was just so many of them. It was just a great time for me. It really was.
What is the importance of a wrestling manager? Because it seems like there's not as many today, minus like Paul Heyman and a few other guys, but it seems like back then it was so important to have a manager. Well,
you know, Paul Heyman's great. Jimmy Cornette was great. All the managers that I had fun with up there were just awesome. But I think back in the day, a lot of times the managers did a lot of the talking and kind of put your talent over, what I've always liked to do. And nowadays, there's a lot of writing, you know, and so they want really less managers and more of the talent doing their talking, so you really don't need it. And Paul Heyman doesn't really call himself a manager. He calls himself an advocate.
Yes, true. Back then, you were, just a heat magnet. It was almost like, okay, you know, or Missing Link or Bravo, whoever, okay, if they're on their own, you don't like them. But if your associate was like, oh, we really don't like this guy. I mean, how did you become such a heat magnet to the fans? Because it was like, wow, that now the guy is a huge heel because Jimmy Hart is managing him.
Well, I think having a Southern accent, and I think when I used to go to football games or baseball games and my team would lose, I always hated it when the other teams, cheerleaders or mascot or their fans would get right in the camera going, we're number one, we're in it. So I felt like if I could bring that to the table and go, we're the greatest, we beat you know what I'm saying? And by doing that up-tempo type thing, I think we'd generate a lot of heat without really running down the fans, because I never like to run down the fans and call them names and stuff, because after all, they're the ones that are paying our salary and bought a ticket to see us.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like this video if you enjoyed it, and click the subscribe button to not miss any of our latest shoot interviews, match videos, or news updates.